Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Hog Hoop Report with Kevin McPherson. That's Kevin McPherson. I'm Evan Kamiko. Kevin, we are in the middle of May, but there's still a lot of action this week. It was a pretty busy week for Arkansas basketball, all things considered. We'll talk a lot about Boogie Fland. We'll talk about the big news of
Yeah.
the week, Cal being in Little Rock, but let's start with that big news. JJ Andrews, the number one player from the Arkansas in the class of 2026, officially committing to the Razorbacks. You got to be there. You were in person for his commitment. What was that like? What was just the
Yeah.
atmosphere in Little Rock as the number one player is staying in state?
Oh, it was wonderful. And, I've been to some commitment announcements in that arena. Leighton Blocker, when he called the Hogs and made that commitment announcement. And so in the foyer, in the lobby area, just outside the arena, that's kind of where they do it. It's a really nice facility there at Little Rock Christian Academy. But what really makes it special are the people. And it's JJ Andrews. It doesn't get better than that as a person when you're recruiting a player on top of the talent of the player. And I say it all the time. This is a guy that, believe it or not, at number 22 and a 4-star for ESPN, it's just not ranked high enough. I talked about it a couple of days ago on my Hogville Net YouTube Live post commitment that he's just not ranked high enough, and he's gone out and proven it this weekend. But this is a 5-star kind of guy. Calipari, made him that offer just almost a year ago, back in July. He and Isaiah Sealy both got July offers. Sealy ended up signing class of 2025. JJ Andrews, class of 2026, 6'6" wing, powerful, athletic, motor never stops. He's the kind of guy that's determined to win every 50-50 ball, every in-game situation, whether it's making the right pass or taking it upon himself to get a finish. He's improved his skill. It's just everything you want in a player because he impacts winning. And here's a guy that's won back-to-back state championships in the 4A, was the MVP as a sophomore to cap that back-to-back 2 years ago. Last summer, he led Bradville Elite to the program's first and only ever Nike Peach Jam, which is the pinnacle of the best circuit out there on the E16 level. Led that team to that title. Been a member of Team USA's junior national team in these mini camps and training sessions. So he checks all the boxes for the kind of guy that Calipari can use as a centerpiece to build around, and he'll be after other 5-star guys. And I believe JJ Andrews. I've never thought that he's not a 5-star, even though some of these national rankings right now don't have him as such. I think that's going to come back around, but this is a 5-star win all the way around for the Arkansas Razorbacks. John Calipari. He's also a legacy. His dad, Sean Andrews, former All-American at Arkansas, first-team All-American back in the day, early 2000s, went on to have an all-pro career in the NFL. But he was in attendance. Of course, his mom was a collegiate athlete. She was kind of running things over there, setting everything up. And it was just a great day for Calipari in his now third recruiting cycle. I know that sounds weird. He's only been on the job since April of last year, but this is the third recruiting cycle. Gets it off on a great start, and we'll talk a little bit Nike EYBL, but JJ Andrews proven the point this weekend over at Memphis.
Yeah, it's funny, Kevin, because we've kind of talked about Cal and his recruiting style and the fact that he's been recruiting a lot of out of state players. We haven't seen a lot of in state Arkansas kids yet who really, besides Isaiah Sealy, who's coming next year, who's a Springdale native, has really been and committed to Arkansas and to Coach Calipari. Sealy was talking with Eric Musselman before, but he ended up staying. But it really feels like Andrews is the first true Arkansas kid to be a John Calipari recruit here in Arkansas. So how important is that again, you keep your top in-state kids in state and kind of silence some of the haters in a sense of saying, well, Cal doesn't want to recruit in state?
Well, it depends. He said when he took the job, we're going to recruit the state if they're players that can help us. And he identified Sealy and Andrews. Again, he offered both of those players back in July of last year, and he's gotten both of them. Sealy will be on campus later this month to move in
Yeah.
and begin his freshman campaign with summer session 1 and limited practices. And then Andrews obviously will be in the fold again as the first off the board. Now, Calipari has stated multiple times he'll take 3 or 4 out of the high school ranks every year. Maybe now it's looking more like it'll be 4 moving forward based on what he said Wednesday. But this is player 1, and it's a great one to get. I mean, this is not just, okay, we got to take an Arkansas kid. Let's just get it over with. This is not what this is. Trust me. It's nowhere near that. This was a fierce recruiting battle. Missouri and LSU were there till the end. Calipari, I was told, a source told me, Thursday morning, I felt really good going into the announcement based on information I got at the last, basically Thursday morning. And I started putting out cryptic tweets, videos of Ice Cube and It's a Good Day, and Baby Billy celebrating, from Righteous
Righteous
Gemstones,
Gemstones, great
different.
show.
Yeah, I was trying to signal that this was going to be a good day. That Calipari dug in the trenches the last 3 weeks of his recruitment and made this happen. And this isn't just a guy like the Hog Father. He sits back and he waits for everybody to come to him and kiss the ring. What favor can I do for you? No, he gets in the trenches when necessary, rolls up the sleeves. And it was his personal touch of the last 3 weeks that effectively flipped this for Arkansas. With everything that lined up perfectly, Calipari, the greatest recruiter, ended up being the thing that closed it because, it's an in-state kid. His dad, again, he'd be a legacy. All that was there, but NIL money, Missouri was making a real big push at the end. It didn't matter. Calipari was, eh, eh, being Calipari, doing Calipari things. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, always good to see, always good to hear. And Cal, that wasn't his only stop this week. They were on the Razorback Road Show, kind of all the last couple of the last week or so, traveling around the state, hitting every place that you could possibly imagine. You were able to kind of see Cal throughout the week. You saw him on Wednesday, got to talk to him. What were kind of those conversations like, and take us into what the insight that you got on the road with him was.
Yeah, well, he did a media scrum on Wednesday, really before that roadshow event. It's how we did it the year before in Little Rock when he came down, just after being hired. So similar format, different location, but in Little Rock, downtown Little Rock. I hit him immediately. Tell us about the roster, including Carter Knox, or in addition to him, or however that plays out. What are you looking to do? And in that moment said, sometimes less is more. We were better at times last year when we were down to 7, even 6 or 8. So he never, really took the opportunity to say, yeah, we're definitely looking to not only get Carter back, but to maybe add some depth pieces there. But later he said, we might add one more. We could certainly do that. It's you got to kind of play it cool in this position right now. You're not in a hurry. You've got the bulk of your roster. You've got an 8 deep as opposed to 9 deep last year. But you also have guys like Celia and Kareem Artal, who you brought from overseas, a 20-year-old. He'll be a freshman who may be more playable back in depth than what you had outside your top 9 last year. Guys that were effectively walk-ons, even if they were on scholarship, they weren't going to play. So it's maybe a little bit different as is now. And again, that's assuming Carter Knox comes back, in which we think he will. So Calipari I wouldn't say danced around it, wildly, just kind of the same talking points we've been hearing. Maybe we're okay where we're at. But if something becomes available that makes sense, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. So we're still kind of waiting. And Calipari has been known when he was at Kentucky to add players late. Much later than where we are right now. And so you didn't see that really in Arkansas's first roster build, because you had to get that thing together. And there wasn't really any waiting around, except for at the end, Trevor Brazile, when he, went through his draft process, had entered the portal, and they ended up, filling him in as that 9th guy. This time around, we'll see. I asked him about Boogie Fland. He said, we support the same stuff he's been saying. We support Boogie. I do. Whatever he needs, we'll see what happens, that kind of thing. Boogie Fland, by the way, reporting out today that there were rumors over the weekend that he arrived in Gainesville. Now we're hearing that he's going to start a visit tomorrow. I saw John Rothstein, some others, but John Rothstein actually specifically said in his tweet that Boogie Fland will begin a visit, I guess his official visit to Florida on Monday. But Calipari didn't really give any clues that there was a real path for Boogie to come back to Arkansas. And he talked about other things during that scrum and during the actual show part where he's interacting with fans and answering questions. Talked about Arkansas' schedule. He'd like to have North Carolina be the team that Arkansas hosts this year in the ACC SEC Challenge. We know Arkansas is going to play Duke and Chicago, but he also talked about, had some not real specific, but getting Baylor in. Well, what does that mean? In state, Arkansas played Baylor in Dallas. Would they play him in Little Rock or Fayetteville? You'd love for that to be a home game.
Right.
Really, that's just a megaphone screaming must-see TV, compelling basketball. Arkansas played them in early November. Remember the second game, so you wonder if you did host a game like that, would it be that early in the season? Get fans, you get those big exhibition games, and Bud Walton, and 2 years ago you got Duke in the ACC SEC Challenge. A few weeks later, last year you didn't get much after that when you beat Kansas, number one ranked in exhibition. You'd like to see a team come in with some real teeth in addition to hosting in North Carolina. The other preference I have is maybe Louisville in that ACC SEC Challenge. You'd really see a different element and vibe in Bud Walton Arena as soon as November and even maybe December than what we typically see other than charity exhibition games.
Yeah, it's a really fun time. And again, we're figuring all of this out as it comes, as the information comes out. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive into the Boogie Fland news because I think that's big enough where we got to dive into it a little bit more and
Yeah.
see what that all comes out. So that's coming up. Stick around. More Hog Hoops Report with Kevin McPherson returns in just a minute. Welcome back into the Hog Hoops Report with Kevin McPherson. That's Kevin. I'm Evan Kamiko. Kevin, we touched on it a little bit ago, but let's dive deep into it right now. A couple of weeks ago, it was reported Boogie Fland was entered into the transfer portal, and now it is official. He will not be going through the NBA draft process anymore, and will be looking for a new home, potentially maybe a return to Arkansas in 2026 or 2025, 2026, I should say. Let's dive into it, Kevin. What do you make of the Boogie news,
Yeah.
and especially that Florida is the front runner to land Boogie Fland?
Well, that's been the talk for a while, even before, he went to the NBA draft combine in the beginning of the week, actually was measured there, and, was named to one of the competing rosters for the 5-on-5 scrimmages that were to take place later in the week. And then before that happened, he didn't go through any of the shooting drills or any of the other testing. He withdrew from the draft. And you continue to hear, I had sources there, NBA draft scouts, NBA scouts, people there on the ground telling me, reaching out saying, "Hey, it's wildfire over here. Florida's the name in play at the kind of at the top of the list for him." And now we know he starts a visit, technically, I guess official visit tomorrow. If he hadn't already been on campus or in Gainesville, that's happening really quickly. So right now, his agent Mike Miller was a former Florida Gator. This is interesting that he showed up at the combine and quickly got out of there before going through any of that process to get more feedback. So you got to think that means somebody has stepped up with some serious NIL money beyond what was likely to be probably a mid-second round, destination in the draft. Maybe something a little better than that, but if you can get a big enough NIL purse for 1 year, it'll be comparable to probably guaranteed money he could have negotiated over 2 years. And there's pros and cons to going ahead and doing that and staying in or coming back to school. But they've made the calculation, his camp, get back to school. And yeah, Florida looks like, until we hear otherwise, the front runner. Arkansas is awfully crowded at that lead guard spot. When you're trying to figure out, just like you did a year ago when it was a little awkward for a while with Boogie and DJ Wagner, and it took Boogie going out, exit stage left with an injury, for DJ to play his best basketball mostly at the one. You've got that same, you're pondering, well, how's it going to work this year with DJ juggling some of those duties with Darius A. Cup Jr., Boogie Fland coming back? It's a weird quandary because you're like, wait a minute, this guy was a really good player until he got hurt. He was a McDonald's All-American, all the stuff that Calipari covets. He would be part of your retention. But, man, you are just log jammed at that one spot where everybody's expecting to have a lion's share of that role. And I don't know that that makes a whole lot of sense of, when you weigh all the pros and cons at the end of it. I think it's unlikely, the least likely of whatever his options are going to be, that it would be Arkansas. Or it could be that Calipari puts a full court press on, makes a change of heart, figures out a way to sell it to everybody, the players, get the NIL worked out, and now you're in a two-horse race with Florida. But I think Florida can promise him, hey, the ball's in your hands. We just won a national title. We got a lot of frontline support around you. We've done well in the portal in our recruiting. You're our lead guard. Arkansas's got 3 lead guards. It's kind of like football. When you have 2 or 3 quarterbacks, what's the saying? You don't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it might be kind of one of those things when you look at the Boogie Fland, why it may not, while you see all the reasons why it makes sense to try to keep him, but there's plenty why it may not be a reality and something that's practical in application.
Yeah, and again, it's take it one day at a time and see what happens. But if it's not Arkansas, right? Florida's one option. What are maybe some other options that you could see Boogie in schools that he might be talking to, or might be a good fit for him to potentially go to?
Well, you've heard Kansas. I mean, this late in it, because he's such a high, he's one of those guys that's going to be rated at the top of the portal options. And most of those players have already moved on, right? You've got several in the draft still going through that process that'll probably peel off and come back to school. The deadline to do that's May 28th. But as far as a lead guard that's likely to do that, I mean, PJ Haggerty wants to be a lead guard. But Boogie doing what he did in this timing now can give him a little bit of a timing advantage. So you mentioned schools. Any school that's willing to pay enough NIL to get him will put themselves in position to do it. But I think he also wants an opportunity to have a best case to showcase himself again for the next year's draft. And so that'll separate some of these teams at the top, like a Florida. Yeah, again, Kansas has been mentioned. Arkansas, again, I think there's more reasons to think that probably won't happen, even though there's plenty of good reasons to say, hey, why not? He's familiar with the coaching staff. They recruited him to Kentucky before he ever made it to Arkansas. He was doing well at Arkansas. All these things that are true, there are a lot of other things that are true too. And it's a different vision. It's a different season. It's a different, Arkansas didn't recruit Darius Acuff Jr. with the idea that Boogie was coming back. They told him, you're the guy. They had to figure out how to retain DJ, and they're going to have to figure out how to make it work for him and maximize what he can bring to the table when he's back to sharing lead guard duties. Do you really think a guy like Boogie Fland signing up to, again, I go back to that, to split those minutes and maybe he's not able to position himself, even if he gets good NIL to come to Arkansas, like he could somewhere else. So when you mention other teams, I think it's mostly other teams, and I just don't see a path that makes sense that put Arkansas in the lead here.
And when you talk about Boogie Fland, he's one of the guys that early in the season, kind of through the first 15, 16 games, it looked like he was going to be a surefire lottery pick. And then again, the injury happens. He falls. He slips to the second round. And that's kind of the interesting thing. And that's kind of what I want to get into right now with the NBA draft versus NIL, because you have these guys who at one point in time would be a mid-second round pick and it'd be a no-brainer to go. But now NIL is kind of keeping these guys in the college game and around the college game. I'm curious for you, who's covered the college basketball game for a while. Is that something that could benefit college basketball or could hurt college basketball? The fact that these middle tier NBA draft guys are now more inclined to stay an extra year in college rather than go to the NBA.
Yeah, the numbers are bearing that out as well when you start looking at it across the landscape. And so I think NIL does help the college game. There's lawsuits out there. I was talking about this with somebody who's a family member of someone that's actually playing in the NBA now. Yesterday when I was in Memphis, and we were having this discussion, and at some point, are players going to be able to play in college as long as they can stay in college? Are they going to be able to figure out to have unlimited eligibility while they're in college? Are they going to change the clock rule, on when your clock starts? So the college game is effectively, we've seen the moves with players being able to have freedom to move about, get in the portal, not have to sit out, those things. Now we're seeing it in the money and all these NIL deals. Eventually the rules may just create where the college game looks more and more like a competitor with the NBA. Now, at the end of the day, the NBA is still going to be the top dog there, but we may see more and more, money value for players to stay in college beyond what we're even seeing right now, and it's been luring players back. When you look at the numbers for guys that decided to come back or stay in versus what the numbers were even last year.
Yeah, really interesting debate that'll really, take shape over the next couple of years as we continue to see guys stay a little longer in college because they can, because the money is there, because they can, support their friends and families rather than take money that might not be there for a second round player. So as we kind of move forward, Kevin, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to hit on?
Not really. I think we got it. I mean, just keep your eyes on the Carter Knox situation. We all expect he'll be back. Every NBA draft scout that I talked to didn't even give a range for him to be drafted when I asked them about that. They said, look, he's coming back to Arkansas. We always say it only takes one team to say, hey, we're going to pick you somewhere, give you a guarantee to change that narrative. And so we'll see what happens there. But all indications are the most likely thing he'll do is come back. Then you've got your 10 players, and you then see what Calipari does next. Does he add anybody else? If he does, is it a depth piece somewhere, maybe a shooter on the perimeter, maybe a depth on your front line? Is it one of those back end kind of guys where they're more development, may not see the court unless there's an emergency? It felt like Arkansas had emergencies last year with injuries, but then as they started to lose, it wasn't like they just lost guys. They lost Boogie Fland and Adu Therill, their two leading scorers, their two best players, and they kept winning. They figured it out. So you don't want to be in that position. You don't know that it wouldn't be a disaster if something like that happened again. But at the same time, Calipari, he's talking, don't count on any more additions. And that now it's really, if that's the case, then you better hope it's Carter Knox coming back, because he's not. You better add somebody.
Real quickly on Carter Knox, what do you think the addition of getting him back would do for the Hog team as a whole?
I think he's an all SEC caliber guy in year two. I think guys like Darius Acuff as a freshman and Carter Knox are probably my pecking order 1, 2. You can interchange that on guys that you look at and say, I could see that guy being first team all SEC next year. I could see a path for that. And I don't rule out for other guys being all league caliber. Trevor Brazil maintains his fevered playing and consistency and production like we saw in the last 9 games. Malik Ewan is a really good offensive big man that you brought into the transfer portal. Maybe there's a pathway for him to work himself into some kind of all SEC selection. Remember, there's 3 all league teams, first, second, and third, 15 players. Plus there's an all defensive team. Plus there's all freshman team, which, guys like Malik Thomas and Darius Acuff will, have a great shot at that. So this roster is really, really good in the top 8. And I think there are multiple guys that could be all league. But when you ask me about Carter, he's the guy. And again, I mentioned Acuff as a freshman newcomer. I look at those two as maybe at the top of the list of the guys that you feel going into it give you the best chance of leading your team and being the man, good enough to get again rise up to the top of the league when you start looking at postseason individual awards. Of course, a lot of that falls to how did your team do, but I think this will be another really good team at Arkansas under John Calipari. Last year's team started the season ranked top 16 in the country, finished the season in the Sweet 16, should have been an Elite 8 team, finished top 20 ranked when the final polls came out. This team has already got some way too early top 10 rankings. It's way early, right? We're still in May, but that's based on a Carter Knox coming back. And so, yeah, I think this guys like that, it's not just about how good the individual is, but it then lends itself to then how do you project the team? So I think this is going to be a solid year 2 for John Calipari, but a lot of that has to do with getting Knox back.
And again, continuity, I think, is a really big thing in this whole entire, team that we talk about, because
Yeah.
last year, was year 1. You're starting to get these guys in, and this year it being year 2, you have that consistency from year 1 now to year 2, where you can really the foundation you can build and go from there.
Yeah, I agree. And Calipari is probably took a lot of flack leaving Big Blue Nation, and they didn't have the great postseason success the last 5 years, so it looked kind of like a trend. But if you looked at his teams typically with just a few outliers in his 15 years there, I mean, not very many. Most of his teams were top 15, top 10, top 20, had their share of postseason success until the final 5 years. But even in those years, they were finishing first in the SEC or second in some of those last 5 years. So I didn't see really that much of a drop off, other than you do have a concern maybe about postseason. Then he answered that this year. So I think he's positioned Arkansas well to be one of the top teams in the country next year. How good? Well, that remains to be seen. But top 10 in that 10 to 20 range starting out seems fair to me.
Absolutely. And a lot of time till November, but there's always good time to talk about basketball. That's going to do it for your Hog Hoops Report. For Kevin McPherson, I'm Evan Camico. We'll see you back here next Sunday.